Okay. Good morning, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, thank you guys for joining us. Welcome to the Foster Youth Bill of Rights 20th anniversary celebration. My name is Tahari Jackson. I'm going to be emceeing today's event, helping us navigate and transition through an agenda full of insightful information. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a day full of events. Hopefully, wherever you guys are at, hope you guys can mute yourselves as a friendly reminder. And if you guys have any questions, make sure that you guys are directed to the chat for all your questions, and they will surely be answered when the time is granted. Ladies and gentlemen, looking at our agenda, we have a day full of information. First, we're going to hear from our CBSS director, Kim Johnson, and acting foster care and ombudsman person, Greg Rose, followed by a video about the new foster youth rights publications. After that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to hear a message from our Youth Law Center Executive Director, Jennifer Rodriguez. And then we're going to transition into a panel discussion to learn a little bit more about the history and the context of the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. We're going to have time for a couple of breaks. And when we come back, we're going to hear from a youth panel, as well as their perspectives on the Foster Youth Bill of Rights and how we can improve them as a system and as a team. There are going to be time for another break, and then we come back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have some breakout sessions where you guys could be able to pick your topic of choice and be able to learn a little bit more insight on that. And we're going to reconvene for a TED Talk video and hear closing remarks from Jennifer Troya. We're going to kick off this event with some opening remarks from Kim Johnson. Ladies and gentlemen, Kim Johnson was appointed by Gavin Newsom as the Director of California Department of Social Services, July of 2019. And Ms. Johnson has previously been appointed by Governor Jerry Brown to serve as the Deputy Director of the Family Engagement and Empowerment Division, and was responsible for the planning, policy direction, and oversight of services to more than over 4 million individuals, children, families, experiencing poverty through safety, net resources, employment opportunities, addressing inequities, and additional engagement strategies. Ms. Johnson has over 20 years of experience working in various family support and children programs focused on social justice, equity, and poverty disruption in both community-based organizations and the government. Kim Johnson.
Thank you so much, Tahari, and good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the California Foster Youth Bill of Rights 20th anniversary celebration. Again, as Mr. Jackson noted, my name is Kim Johnson. I'm the Director of the Department of Social Services. I want to thank all of you, and especially the team at Social Services, for helping to support this work and putting together this celebration this morning. And I want to thank all of you, the current and former foster youth, educators, service providers, social workers, caregivers and parents, probation officers, and tribal leaders who have taken the time to join us this morning in this celebration. I come to you with humility this morning, as I am not one of the many individuals, and many of which are here today, who developed the Bill of Rights, but I can tell you that our department is absolutely committed to implementing them, ensuring they are upheld across our state. We are absolutely, it's our responsibility as we continue to use these rights to guide us on our decisions about our internal processes in the department, our licensing policies, of course, the policies across the child welfare and foster care systems that we are supporting. And also, it's just a critical reminder to all of us about how we do our work in engaging with communities and those we serve in the actual process to design it. So again, just humbled to be amongst all of you leaders this morning who have brought us to this point. I want to say a little bit about how we got here and the journey, and really appreciate, again, the tremendous partnership across so many different organizations and individuals in this space. But all the way back, 1998, we had legislation that established the Office of the Foster Care Ombudsperson, and we had that requirement put into the law that that office was created to receive, investigate, and resolve complaints about the care placement services and the youth right violations of youth in care. The office was also tasked with disseminating this information about the rights and compiling and reporting data to the legislature to help inform systemic change. 2001, 20 years ago, the Foster Youth Bill of Rights was created through the passage of Assembly Bill 899. At the time, Assembly Member Liu was championing that and sponsoring that legislation. This landmark legislation identified 21 rights for foster youth and out-of-home care. And of course, since then, that legislation has been amended several times to reflect changes in the law. On September 30th, 2016, Assembly Bill 1067, authored by Assemblymember Gibson, was signed by the governor, which required our department to convene a working group, which again, appreciate those of you who remember that and participated in that, with the responsibility of making recommendations to the legislature for revising the rights, reviewing them in a manner which foster children were, of course, again, informed and apprised of their rights, and again, recommending changes in the frequency or ways in which this was occurring. October 2nd, 2019, the governor signed Assembly Bill 175, again authored by Assemblymember Gibson, the champion on this issue, which required the revision and addition of various rights. This bill went into effect January 1 of 2020 and now identifies 41 rights for youth in foster care. And I really just want to lift up and just really name the concept of rights and the tie of those rights to social justice and addressing injustice and our collective responsibility to ensure that these rights are upheld and supported, and again, that youth are informed about them. I want to give a special shout out along that journey to California Youth Connection, CYC, Los Angeles County Youth Law Center, and other countless leaders who've been a part of this journey and really pushing to get these rights passed and established. Again, want to appreciate and lift up tremendous work of the department's Office of the Foster Care Ombudsperson, who's been able to accomplish many things since they, again, were established in 1998, including the revisions to these rights over time, developing age-appropriate publications, forming working groups, again, that have captured and included and embedded the voice of youth in care. And I also want to just lift up, again, as we are all coming into recovery of this public health emergency and pandemic, that office was able to keep their hotline open 7 days a week, making that accessible during this last year. In 2020 alone, the office received a total of 22,573 calls from current and former foster youth, relatives, county partners, community advocates, and concerned citizens. From those calls, the office conducted 777 investigations, provided 1,798 foster youth verification letters, and 1,739 information and referrals. The office also received over 45 training requests around the Bill of Rights and also around reasonable, prudent parenting trainings. So tremendous effort, tremendous work. It is a celebration. It is a recognition. As you engage in this space together, as we engage together, please take a moment to celebrate and recognize this tremendous work and its importance. Please listen to each other, explore these new ideas, be inspired to continue and strengthen our work that we do in partnership in this space. I have the privilege of engaging with current and foster former youth in ongoing dialogue as part of my work and responsibility. We still have work to do, as some continue to report that either they didn't know about their rights or kind of when they learned about them in their journey, or that their resource families didn't adhere to them. So again, work we have to do together to continue to ensure that every youth is able to live in a safe, healthy, and comfortable environment where they are free from physical, sexual, emotional abuse, where they have the ability to visit and contact their siblings and other family members. They have social contact with their communities, and more of those 41 rights that are established today. On behalf of the department, the Office of the Ombudsperson, we'd like to thank current and former foster youth for sharing and bringing your voice to this work, making sure that we as government are engaging and implementing practices that make a difference. Thank you to each individual here dedicated to improving the lives of children. Thank you again for celebrating and participating with us today. And as I had the opportunity to spend some time with now Supervisor Holly Mitchell out of Los Angeles, who shared with our staff recently a quote I'll leave with you: "How big is your brave?" Appreciate you all. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, and I'll turn it back to you. Back over to you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim, for those comments. Really appreciate that. We're going to turn it over to Greg Rose, who has prepared a couple of opening remarks for us today. For those of you who don't know, Greg Rose is our acting ombudsman, foster care ombudsman person, and he provides leadership with respect to the department's equity and inclusion work in various programs. For the past 12 years, Greg has has been the CFSD Deputy Director in the department. And in that time, he has provided visionary leadership that has greatly benefited the children and families served not only citywide, but statewide as well. Greg Rose.
Thank you all. Thank you, Tahari, and for this invitation to speak with you guys today. I just would say, Director Johnson spoke so eloquently and kind of reflects what is kind of in my heart today as we come to do this celebration. Just wanted to kind of build on some of the things that Director Johnson has said. And first, I just would note that it's for me, it's an interesting moment to be the interim ombudsperson. I never in my career thought that I would come to you from this particular space. I'm certainly no Karen Grace Cahoe, and I'm no Rochelle Trottenberg. Those two women have taught me so much over the years, and have both through their wisdom, their perseverance, and their tenacity, have worked within the department to help folks focus on the separation, grief, and loss of so many of the young people in our care, and always challenged us to continue to remember that, to fight on their behalf, and to remember and to put a face on each one of our young people that we have this unique responsibility to provide for, to care for, and to listen to. And so, it is with humility that I come to you from this seat today, and I'm working right now with the current Ombuds crew to maintain the high quality of work and the standards that have been set over the years, while we find the next ombudsperson for the department. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention around the Ombuds office. Director Johnson mentioned its origins and its importance, and I would just note that it's a unique organization within state government, in that it is autonomous within the division, and the Ombuds people and the Ombuds staff use that autonomy to influence not just positive outcomes for young people who they're working with, but really keep an eye on and keep us accountable to making system change, and just even little things about how the office is recognized for its autonomy. If you may notice, if you visited the website, that the website doesn't have that same look and feel as all the other government websites. All the way up through the governor's office, folks have recognized the importance of the outreach and the connectivity component of the ombudsperson, and has allowed the office to have its autonomy and and create a particular space and brand, if you will, separate and apart from the department, while still included within it. And just little things like the website and some other aspects demonstrate some of those things. Just wanted to mention, Kim described the number, the volume of the calls and things that have come into the Ombuds office, and just thought I would share with you a little bit more granular about some of the types of calls and the kinds of things that our staff work so diligently on with so many of you to resolve issues. And there have been a number of calls that have come in that where placements are at risk, and the Ombuds office, through its kind of careful listening, its process of inquiry, and its ability, our staff's ability to highlight and identify areas that might make a difference, and to maintain the voice of the young person throughout, have really created some spaces where the placement, the place in which the child is living, and the people who are parenting and supporting that child are strengthened and supported, and have worked through issues that may have pulled them apart. And for that, the resource family and or the STRTP staff are stronger, and so is the relationship with the young person. We've had some calls recently, given the disparities in our child welfare system with who's in the child welfare system. You know, often it's overrepresented with Black and brown young people and young people who are gender non-conforming, LGBTQ, et cetera. And one of the cases that the staff is most proud of and worked really hard on to preserve, again, the relationship with a family was with a young person who wasn't having didn't feel that their gender identity was understood and respected. And through a series of conversations with the Ombuds staff and the people that care about this young person deeply, the relationship was strengthened, the quote unquote placement was preserved, and the child welfare worker, the family, and other people are much better acquainted with sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And it's these kinds of, daily work and interventions that make the Ombuds office so important in my mind. And similarly, there's lots of work that we've been doing with young people and service providers in the new STRTP placement settings. These are highly structured placements, and yet those 40 plus rights that Kim described are important and need to be acknowledged. And our staff works diligently with that, with the providers to work through those issues. As I transition to think about where we are, where we're going, and into the future, Director Johnson did describe the kind of the stroll down memory lane, if you will, about where we were. For me personally, I was around in 1998, and then and one of my first jobs was to actually take office equipment from our office at 5th and O to the new location where the Ombuds office was going to be established. And the three of us who did that work, were at the time we thought we were doing something that was somewhat groundbreaking and that would be important. But as I reflect on it now, we had no idea how impactful the office would be in those 20 some odd years. I would just wanted to highlight also that there are these 41 rights now, and one of my as the deputy director of Children and Family Services for the decade plus that I was, one of my prized possessions was a poster of the Bill of Rights signed by ombudsperson, staff, and former foster youth. And I kept that next to my desk in a very prominent place where that I had to look at it day in and day out, and that I reflected upon it over the years and have since built a kind of a tribute to the young people that we've served with many photographs of me and young people who I've learned so much from. And so to move from these 20 some odd rights to the 40 something that include really important things about gender affirming healthcare and reproductive rights, and so many of the just things that many of us take for granted, but that are so essential for the healing of the trauma. I just want to commend you all for your work in bringing them to where they are today, and for your commitment to make sure that the young people in our collective care, their voice are heard and the rights are adhered to. Finally, I just noted that the Ombuds Office staff is thinking of the future. They are on the front lines of our equity inclusion work, and they will continue to bring that information into our system and work through and fight for social justice. And for that, I will commend and encourage them, and I'll encourage you all to do the same. The last thing I would just mention is that the materials that have been developed with care. They're developmentally appropriate, they're appealing, they're impactful, and also include some a video and some other things that we'll be sharing in the moments to come. So on behalf of the foster care ombudsperson's team, our allies, supporters, and friends, I want to welcome you to today's celebration, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to address the 295 of you who are committed to this, so committed to this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg Rose. My understanding, we have a publication video.
It has information about my rights while I'm in foster care. I want to show you what's in it, so let's check it out. This is the Foster Youth Rights Handbook. Your social worker or your probation officer is supposed to give you a copy of the handbook and explain anything in it that you don't understand. They should give it to you at least every 6 months and whenever you ask for it. You can also find a copy of it on the website. The handbook was put together so you could learn what your rights are and what to do if someone violates your rights. That way you can speak up for yourself and fight for things you need. While you're in foster care, you have rights about things like visiting family, taking certain kinds of medicine, playing sports at school, and a lot of other things. It's important for you to know what they are. In California, there are more than 40 rights that are just for foster youth. All these laws together make up the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. I'm not going to show you every single page of the handbook, but I will show you the easiest way to find what you're looking for. So let's start on page 2, how to use this handbook. To make these laws easier to understand, they are grouped together into topics, like personal rights and family connections. You'll see these little pictures called icons throughout the handbook and on the website. The icons help you find the topic. The main thing that we want you to know is that the rights in this handbook are the law, and they are here to protect you. If you feel like your rights are being violated, you can call one of the phone numbers at the bottom of page 2. Violating your rights means that someone doesn't respect or follow your rights. Ombudsperson is a long word that you may not have heard of before, but just know that an ombudsperson is someone whose job it is to make sure your rights as a foster youth are not violated. Today, I'm going to show you how to find your rights in this handbook. Let's go to page 3, the table of contents. This lists all the topics and the page numbers so you can flip to the page you need. You can see here how the rights are grouped into topics so you can find answers to questions that are important to you. If you find words that you do not understand, you can go to definitions on page 42 through 47 and on page 48. There's also legal language about your rights. Legal language is confusing, so the handbook is written in a way that's easier to understand. But remember, everything in this handbook is still law, even if it's not in legal language. Let's find out more about your rights. Let's say you have a question about whether you can visit your brother or sister. In the table of contents, find connections with family and friends, and you'll see that information about this starts on page 11. When you go to page 11, you can see your question and also see other questions about your family and friends. These are all the rights to help you stay connected to the people you care about in your life. You can do this for any question or topic you want to learn more about. So, be sure to look at all the pages in the handbook. You might see some answers to questions that are on your mind. Another cool thing about this handbook is that there are activities throughout that help you learn about your rights, like the word search on page 15. You'll also see that there are some pages where you can write down information that you do not want to forget. If you want to write down the phone numbers of your doctors, for instance, you can do that on page 26 in the health topic group. Like we said before, it is important to know who to call if you feel like your rights are being violated. Pages 40 and 41 have a list of contact numbers to call. Here's the definition section that I told you about before. You can look up the meaning of any words you don't understand in the handbook. And here on page 48 is the legal language we told you about. Don't forget, everything in this handbook is the law, even if it's not in legal language. I want to show you something else. On page 55 is a form called JV 218, a child's opinion about the medicine. This form gives you a way to tell the judge what you think about the medicine that a doctor wants you to take. You don't have to use it, but it can help make sure the judge knows what you think. And now I want to show you the signature page. This is where you sign so everyone knows that your social worker or probation officer did talk with you about your rights in a way that you understand. It is the law that they talk with you about them because they are so important. This form has to be signed to prove that this talk happened. Thanks for letting me show you how to use the Foster Youth Rights Handbook. Be sure to visit the website for more information. It's pretty cool, and share this information with other foster youth.
Okay, cool beans. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to flip this channel here and go into a video message from Jennifer Rodriguez, who is the Executive Director of the Youth Law Center, advocating to transform foster care and juvenile justice system across the country so that youth can thrive. Jennifer has spent many years of her childhood in foster care and juvenile justice facilities and has spent most of her life advocating to ensure justice, compassion, and opportunity for system-involved youth. Her advocacy has resulted in significant national policy, practice, and culture changes around the fundamental needs of youth, informally including youth involved in the system. In addition, Jennifer served for 8 years at the California Youth Connection, CYC, leading efforts resulting in major legislative and policy accomplishments for California probation and the foster community youth.
Happy 20th anniversary to the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. I'm Jennifer Rodriguez. I'm the Executive Director and a lawyer at the Youth Law Center. Back in 1998, I was a member of the California Youth Connection, and we decided that creating rights for youth in foster care and figuring out a mechanism to enforce them was our top priority. Too many youth had experiences like I had, being isolated in restrictive group home placement, far away from home, where anything could really be done to us without consequence. Those experiences range from small harms to big harms. My own experiences were not unusual. Having earnings from a summer job digging ditches at the Conservation Corps disappear from the locked cash box in the staff office, being left out of school for months after I moved placement, not being able to talk to my dad who was incarcerated for years because he could only call collect, and my placements wouldn't accept collect calls, having to shoplift personal products like deodorant and tampons when placements refused to provide them, being forced to take psych meds when my sleeping schedule didn't adult jail cell before going to juvenile hall because I fought back against a staff who was sexually abusive. Despite having a social worker, a lawyer, a therapist, and all kinds of other professionals being paid to ensure that our needs were met, there was no one who could take action. When we tried to seek resolution, our concerns were often minimized, dismissed, forgotten about, and at worst, we weren't believed or we were punished for raising the issues. It was frequently our word against adults' words, and we always lost in that fight. It felt like since we were in foster care, rather than being safer and more protected, instead, we lost status as a child and we lost all of the things that define a childhood, namely adults to care for us and make sure we were okay. Something had to be done. We tried several times to introduce a group home bill of rights, but providers fought back successfully. Finally, with the support of the Youth Law Center, we were able to craft a bill that consolidated all of the existing rights of youth into one place and required notification of youth. We successfully passed the law that created California's first foster care bill of rights. At the time, our focus was on making sure that youth and those who had responsibility for their life knew the basics of how we should be treated. We had no idea that our Bill of Rights would be held up as a model for states across the US and ultimately adopted into federal law. Our focus wasn't changing national systems. It was simply protecting future children from the long, painful list of abuses that had happened to us. We also knew that rights were going to be meaningless unless there was someone who could call if they were violated. What most people don't realize is that all of the rights in the Foster Youth Bill of Rights had existed for years prior to our bill, but youth didn't know, and there was no way to enforce those rights. We knew we needed someone to enforce who was youth-focused, who would believe youth, who understood the law well, who would treat youth consistently, no matter what county they were from, what kind of placement they were in. So CYC also worked to create the first ever foster care ombudsman's office in the entire nation that was solely dedicated to educating and enforcing youth rights. I was lucky enough to have had the chance to work with the first foster care ombudsman, Karen Grace Cahoe, as her first student assistant in Sacramento while I was in community college, and to help set up the office and set the protocol. Karen was a pit bull in pearls, totally committed to thinking about the children and youth we were mandated to work for as her own children, and demanding nothing less than she'd want for her own. In those first days of the Ombudsman's office, we traveled all across the state, meeting with youth, resource parents, group homes, social workers, probation officers, lawyers, and advocates, anyone and everyone who would listen, to make sure they knew youth had rights in foster care, to make sure they understood how those translated to real life, and answering questions. Every single presentation we did ended in at least one person taking us aside at the end to make a complaint. Usually they had no idea until they talked to us that they had rights or that anyone would believe or care to enforce those rights. Again, youth complaints detailed hundreds of ways that their childhood had been stolen from them in foster care. Youth who hadn't been able to see the people they loved most in the world, their extended families or siblings in too long, youth who were denied the right to go on sleepovers, youth whose cell phone lifeline to the world was taken when they entered a placement, youth who hadn't received a clothing allowance in order to buy underwear that fit, youth whose social workers never returned their calls, parenting youth who had CPS remove their babies because they'd been moved too many times, youth who were worried that they'd be homeless when they left foster care. The Ombudsman's office was the only place that so many of those youth had to turn. We listened carefully, took their concerns seriously, provided them information to self-advocate, investigated and notified their attorneys and social workers. We notified community care licensing when a placement wasn't meeting standards, and we made sure that staff and leadership knew that they needed to do a better job ensuring counties followed the law and improved their practice. In those days, as now, the Ombudsman's office was a critical reminder for CDSS of who child welfare is supposed to focus on, the child. While there are now more laws, more protections, and more rights, too many children and youth, unfortunately, still experience the same disregard of their childhood. When Rochelle was appointed as ombudsman, she represented a vision come true for those of us who advocated to create the position in office. Being appointed the protector of rights of children within a system that's not structured to deeply respect and honor those rights is truly a challenging job. However, if we as youth advocates in CYC had imagined the kind of advocate who could do justice to this role, Rochelle would have been that person. Rochelle couldn't have come at a more important time. She firmly established the Ombudsman's office as the moral conscience within CDSS, representing the rights of the most poorly served youth in policy discussions. Rochelle and the Ombudsman staff tirelessly have upheld the mission of the office through political and priority changes, and they have made the rights powerful and real. We are now at another critical moment. The pandemic has turned the lives of so many youth in foster care upside down, adding additional instability, disconnection, educational loss, isolation, and sadness. While California policy should be moving away from group care, we're still struggling to fulfill our promise of the most basic right, that every youth, every day, lives in a nurturing family where they can receive the most important thing we can offer them, excellent parenting. We know there's still much work to do. Just a couple months ago, the last of over 100 youth returned to California after out-of-state foster care facilities that were characterized by national news sources as profitable death traps due to their abusive practices, deplorable conditions, and little oversight, were finally decertified by CDSS. These are the youth the Ombudsman's office was created to serve and protect, and these are the rights that the office makes into real commitments. For the future, it's more important than ever that we ensure the Foster Care Ombudsman's office can live its mission of protecting and enforcing the rights of youth. There is much to celebrate. The reason we're having this meeting today is due to the power and advocacy of those who have worked to make life better for other youth like them. At 20 years in, though, there are also questions we should be asking ourselves. Do we feel we've dedicated the appropriate amount of resources, power, and attention to enforcing the rights of youth in foster care? Do we do everything possible to place the rights of children who depend on us over the interest and convenience of adults in this system? Do we make every policy and decision in California from a starting place of what children need developmentally to thrive and what is going to produce a healthy and happy 40-year-old? Does the office we've mandated to protect and enforce the rights of youth have the staffing that reflects the important role it plays in ensuring quality care? Does it have the structure and independence needed for the appropriate power and influence the office should have? Do we need new accountability for foster youth rights? Are there new roles for the office in bolstering youth involvement, quality improvement, and reform in counties across the state so that protecting the rights of foster youth becomes the way that we do business in child welfare, rather than something we think of after we've already inflicted harm. These are the questions that I hope that we can work together to answer as we celebrate 20+ years of foster youth rights in California. Thank you so much.
Cool beans, ladies and gentlemen. We got a panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be diving into the Foster Youth Bill of Rights, the history, as well as the context. Many individuals that's going to be on this panel who were involved in this historical turning point. And in this panel, we'll be hearing from those who played major roles in developing and implementing the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. After reflecting on the past, we'll also hear about where California stands now, areas of improvement, and ways that we can move forward. We have a panelist including Tiffany Johnson, Karen Grace-Cow, Rochelle Totenberg, and Rita. We're going to turn it over to Karen, we're going to turn it over to Tiffany, who I'm told you can really discuss the early portions of what was transpiring when the Foster Youth Bill of Rights was being created. Tiffany?
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? I am Tiffany Johnson, currently the Bay Area Program Director for the Magic Cabinet Foundation. And I joined the California Youth Connection in 1991. And I stayed involved for almost 3 decades as a member, but as several roles as a staff person. But let's be honest, I really served like every role in the organization during my time there. So I've really experienced the metamorphosis of CYC from this sort of grassroots early days to the powerhouse that they are today. But there were many growing pains, sadness, and triumphs along the way. And the Foster Care Bill of Rights really was the epitome of our pain and triumphs. I like to think of CYC, or the creation of CYC, as the beginning of the foster care civil rights experience, at least for California. In the early days, it was a struggle for numerous reasons. And I like to give an honor to all the trees that we harmed in those early days, because there was no TikTok, Facebook, email, cell phones, Twitter. There was no LinkedIn for us to call or for us to check on folks' background to get a better understanding on how to strategize a conversation. We did everything by snail mail, lots of packets, like big bulky packets mailed to young people and community members. Now, I really feel like me being middle-aged now, telling the story, I'm telling the story of our parents walking through the snow to get to school, but you get it, things were different during those times. But the other challenges that we were facing during that time is when I entered CYC, there was about 110,000 foster youth and young people in foster care at that time. The system was completely stretched. I mean, of course it's stretched today, but it was completely stretched. And we were nearing the end of the crack epidemic. So young people were coming into foster care at alarming rates. No one wanted to listen to us, as they would call us the complaining kids at that time. So our advocacy journey began mostly we were all in high school at the time, and we knocked on numerous doors, and many doors slammed in our faces. Basically, folks did not respect our experience, and we were rough around the edges. This was really unfamiliar territory at this time in California, to have young people entering these spaces. The only thing that we knew is that our rights were being violated and young people deserved better. So we continually not asked, but demanded a seat at the table, which caused a lot of tensions. One, because policymakers and anyone involved in making decisions never had to open their space to constituents in this level before, but they never had to open the door for young people before. And then again, we weren't used to being at that table. So we were like the products of these systems that were oppressing us, but we didn't know how to infiltrate those systems at that time. And we had many opponents. And some of those opponents actually on this call today, but I won't say their names. And they, at the time, they just really didn't understand the plight of what we were going through, our experiences and our struggles. But I can tell you the one thing they did not bargain on was that our incredible drive to enact change. So in 1997, we were invited to a meeting with former Lady Hillary Clinton, and that led to some other accomplishments. But for this purpose, we felt like that accomplishment, that meeting opened up other people's doors. So those folks who used to be our opponents their ears started to perk up a little bit. I wouldn't say they still completely understood what we were doing. They weren't completely all the way on board, but doors started to open and people started to listen. So we believe our experience with former First Lady Hillary Clinton contributed to what happened next. A couple of years after that meeting, I think it was in 2000, the legislative budget was changed to include a line item for youth voice and identified CYC to be the vehicle for that voice. This was amazing. That was a monumental change. And I would say that's a part of that civil rights sort of experience, to have young people voice be a part of our legislative budget. So now that gave us more moolah, right? More resources, access. And so when I started at CYC, we had 9 chapters run very loosely across the state with young people and caring adults, but not a lot of structure. And remember, no social media. And then by the time we introduced the first Bill of Rights, we had up to 18 chapters across the state of California. So this gave us more access to young people, more young people's stories, and to give us a better sort of universal understanding of the foster youth experience. So young people had more opportunity to compare their experiences with others, and we really could document the inconsistencies of those experiences. So many young people's rights were being violated in many different ways. They either one person was getting one right, one person didn't know the right, somebody had a misunderstanding of the rights, right? So we were able to sort of capture all that now that we have access to young people from across the state. Now, we were not that seasoned, so we often used the prison experience as a comparison at the time. I mean, we had nothing else to compare to, really. So when I was leading a youth workshop with young people, I would often hear them say, well, in prison, they check their mail, and now the group home goes through my mail. So does that mean I'm in jail now? Am I being punished? So these were the kind of conversations like we had to navigate during that time. So although we did have several back-to-back legislative successes, we were still kind of getting our stride as an organization. And so we introduced a very lofty first Bill of Rights that was quickly vetoed. And as you can imagine, young people for the first time have an opportunity to be like, I get to have rights. Well, I want this, I want that, right? So we pretty much put everything in there, including the kitchen sink in that bill. I don't remember all the rights, but I know we wanted everything and we deserved it all. But as we became more savvy in navigating the system, we introduced the bill 2 more times, which eventually was signed into legislation. And at that moment, that was our most comprehensive bill at that time. I was and still very proud of that success. It was not perfect. And I like to imagine the first bill would have been more reflective of what young people needed at the time. But we had to make sacrifices to ensure that young people could start benefiting sooner than later. And the later bill, of course, as we heard earlier today, would be updated to reflect some of the necessary changes. And I imagine we'll continue to adapt of the change and adopt to the changing times. Ultimately, as young people, we sacrificed a lot of our adolescence and young adult life to ensure that this next generation had the ability to have the space at the table and to know their rights and to have the courage to speak up and know when those rights are not being respected. We were desperate to survive a system that mostly failed a lot of us. And we really wanted a bill that gave us hope that our brothers and sisters behind us would not have to endure the same struggles that we did. So I just really want to thank all the young people that participate in that process who are now middle-aged like me, and all the adult people and policy folks and all the folks who really helped create the Bill of Rights and continue to push that message forward today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Karen, you have any insight you want to add to this? Karen? Okay, we can also transition to Rochelle.
Karen, here. Okay, here we go. Sorry.
No
The
worries.
mute button, huh? Yeah, I feel that all the work that Tiffany and CYC and so many young people did to get the foster youth rights established needs to really be acknowledged. The importance of the foster youth voice is just essential. I was the first foster care ombudsman from 2000 to 2015, and we set up the ombudsman's protocols and the systems to make sure that the foster children and youth and the public had access to our toll-free helpline and website so that anyone, including foster children and youth, could lodge a complaint, and that the complaints would be investigated in an objective and caring manner. As it was mentioned before, many of the foster youth felt like they could complain, but nobody really cared. And there wasn't really any repercussions or outcomes that they could see. So it was pretty discouraging time for a lot of the foster youth. When the Foster Youth Rights was passed in 2001, our office created brochures and posters and went around the country, around the United California, doing presentations on the foster youth rights with foster parents, group homes, social workers, and foster youth, and had some of the greatest times going around and hearing from the foster youth in terms of what issues are impacting them in their lives. I'll never forget one investigation that we did. We had received a complaint from a foster youth that the group home didn't have any food, and also that the staff were horrible. And so we visited this group home around dinner time and found only one girl home eating a Hot Pocket. And when we checked, there was totally not adequate food in the house. And with further investigation, we asked the staff, where were the rest of the girls? And they said, oh, they're out. We don't know where they are. But if they come in after 10 o'clock, they have to bring the police. So a lot of red flags. And so we did an intensive investigation. And what we discovered is that the number of the girls had been involved in sex trafficking. And so we were able to document all the personal rights violations, and this group home was closed down, and the youth were relocated. And so the importance of having the rights, but also having the ombudsman office who can follow up and investigate and make sure that there is justice in this complicated system. So most of the complaints that we received from the youth basically had to do with not being treated with respect by their foster parents or the group home staff, not being able to have visitors, not being able to see family, the use of phones, not able to attend school activities and independent living programs. So many of you felt like they were being imprisoned in many ways. So, but the majority of personal rights violations that came to the Ombudsman office at that time were from youth living in group homes. And the Ombudsman office did a statewide investigation into group homes, interviewing the youth that lived there, the staff, and also the administrators. And we really saw where too many of the group homes had a philosophy of power and control, excessive use of restraints or isolations, and they didn't have any clear values or programs. So we made recommendations to the state in terms of that there should be a mechanism for the youth and the families to give like a satisfaction survey as part of the oversight process, improve staff training, and publish data on the different complaints on the different group homes. We all know that there are good group homes and foster homes, but we need to be vigilant in our oversight so that every child and youth in foster care lives in a safe and healthy home where we can see that they're being cared for, supported, and guided as we would want for our own children. Because of the establishment of the Foster Care Ombudsman Office and the Foster Youth Rights, through these complaints, we're able to know about some of the appalling conditions that some of our children in foster youth have lived in. We know that children and youth in foster care were removed from their homes because of neglect or abuse. And these children should not experience additional trauma through the foster care. They should be assisted and supported in their healing process and should have caring, responsible adults to guide them so that they will realize their true true potential. Throughout the 15 years that I served as foster care ombudsman, we worked to educate caregivers, foster parents, group home staff, social workers, youth on the importance of the foster youth rights. And I just want to say that I enjoyed working with the foster youth and seeing how powerful they can be once they are able to articulate their perspectives. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from the other panel members as to what they see as the current challenges and what efforts are being made to improve the foster care system to meet the needs of foster children, youth, and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Rochelle is a former foster youth who was appointed to serve as a former California foster care ombudsman, who was responsible for educating foster youth and caregivers about their rights and investigating complaints related to the care, placement, and services of youth child welfare system. Karen, you have any information you want to? I'm sorry, Rochelle, my apologies.
No worries. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. One of the things that really stands out to me about the significance of what this means is I was leaving foster care in 2000 as Tiffany and Rita and Jennifer and others were advocating in the Capitol for the creation of the Bill of Rights and for the establishment of the Ombuds office. So it really means a lot to me to think about being a kid in a group home in LA County and how most of those experiences were incredibly traumatic and detrimental to my well-being. And like Tiffany mentioned, it was very much similar to a prison experience. My role in the Foster Care Bill of Rights, from the lens of the ombudsperson, I started in 2016. And during that time, there was a bill, AB 1067, another amazing CYC sponsored bill that asked the legislature to basically create a work group. Well, as Tiffany described, legislation changes through the process, but the end result of 1067 was that the Department of Social Services needed to create a work group to review the laws and to make recommendations to the legislature to update the Bill of Rights. We had about a year to do that. And what was interesting is the organization I previously had worked with, the Humboldt County Transition Age Youth Collaboration, had been working alongside CYC as a co-sponsor to that bill. And then during that time, I transitioned into the role as the ombudsperson and had the privilege to facilitate those stakeholder meetings. And one of the things we did is we went back to the legislature, specifically to Assemblymember Gibson, and asked him to allow us to have an additional year to do the work that was required of 1067. And the most important reason for doing that was so that me and my staff could go across California to actually meet with foster youth in their homes, in their ILP programs, in group homes. And we really wanted to make sure we had youth voice as part of that process and recognize that they didn't have access to be coming to Sacramento to help inform the process. So we really valued youth voice. We went out and again, got young people's opinion as well as foster parents and caregivers and other stakeholders. And from that, we developed a report, we sent it to the legislature, and then CYC again did what amazing work they do, and they introduced AB 175 alongside Assemblymember Gibson. And over the course of that year, the legislature voted and the governor signed off on an updated Bill of Rights that I would say is the most comprehensive Bill of Rights for foster youth in the world. So much so that other organizations have reached out to CYC and to my office from across, again, the world. Most recently, there's been a lot of work with Japan and CYC, and I've had the privilege and honor of also being a part of some of that work where they're trying to model a system in their country that reflects both the Ombuds Office and the Bill of Rights. The other thing that I think is important about AB 175 is that we added some really important laws to that. one that hasn't been mentioned today is the Indian Child Welfare Act. That's been in existence since 1978, I believe, and that is now incorporated into the Bill of Rights, and Native youth still face disproportionate rates of being brought into the foster care system, as do African American and Black children. So you'll also notice in the Bill of Rights that we specifically called out the protections related to ethnicity and culture. And so I think that that's an important aspect, especially given the disproportionality rates that continue to persist in child welfare in California and across the country. So G rights were also mentioned: sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. But additionally, like education rights, right? Young people in foster care are still graduating at high school at about the rate of 50%, which is what it was when I left foster care in 2000. Rates of college success continue to be about the same, 1 to 3%. So we added education, we added court rights, we added sexual and reproductive health rights, because we know young women in foster care are getting pregnant younger than their peers. We know that fathers of children that are in foster care are also not getting the support and access that they need to be involved in their children's lives because they are in foster care. So adding those rights were really important. So I think the other aspect about AB 175 and the updated Bill of Rights and what we have to celebrate today is based on our conversations with young people. We found that that we really needed to expand the materials that are available to them to be educated about their rights. We found out from young people that tended to be 16 and older that they really wanted accessibility online. And then we found out from younger youth and youth in congregate care settings that they still needed access to paper documents because they're still being denied the right to access technology and the internet. And that's significant. That's another ad that came through AB 175. So we developed in partnership with Department of Children and Family Services in LA County and the Commission for Children and Families in Los Angeles. The three of us partnered to develop some new documents. So the handbook that was mentioned earlier, there's wallet size accordion brochures, which is what a young person said to me in a group home is, give me something that's sturdy that'll fit in my pocket because I'm moving every month to a new place and I can't keep track of, a handbook. So make me something that fits in my wallet. And we did, we honored that. We also created coloring books for young people, for the younger folks in foster care for the children, because the rights apply to them too. And we want to make that as accessible to them. We also made sure that we had everything in English and Spanish. Really just encouraging access to the documents. So I think my role during this time has really been about building on the incredible foundation that Karen Grace Cahoe paved before me and the other folks that you have heard from and will hear from today. And most importantly is the young people that called our office and that gave us feedback and continue to be brave and courageous in a system that is designed to destruct their lives and not uplift and love and care for them.
Thank you, Rochelle. Really appreciate you being vulnerable and allowing yourself to kind of give back. I think that's what really excites me, is seeing, children who grew up in the foster community kind of leave and have that firing, growing passion to kind of give back. And speaking of people who want to give back, we have Rita, who was a loving mother, a community activist, as well as a professor. She also grew up in foster care, being incarcerated in her youth and becoming a teen mother. And all those things have not stopped her. Rita has been involved in social justice work for more than over 30 years. Her work focuses on healing, restoration, and well-being. She leads with the philosophy of decolonizing spaces and takes pride in building community relationships as a mentor and as a consultant. Rita, can you provide a little bit more information as well as some encouragement on the next steps and efforts from the perspective of an individual, collective, and local efforts to spread the awareness of need for the change?
Well, I just want to say how exciting it is to be here and have heard I've been here this morning listening to everybody speaking, and then also hearing like our introductions. I think kind of makes me emotional because we're not only representative of the past, for the present and the future of hopefully where we're headed. And I think being here, being a collective, I'm not sure exactly, we have almost 3 people in attendance today. And to me, for an online celebration, this is huge. You know, this is a beautiful example of our heart and our passion about making a positive impact. And for me, having grown up in the system and having been devastated by that experience, or feeling that devastation as it was happening, and then exiting the system, and really recognizing that I was part of a community, that I wasn't alone in my struggle, and that there was that CYC and other current and former foster youth wanting to just say, you know, we have to do something. Maybe it's too late. Maybe the damage has been done in terms of my experience in the system, but what about my siblings that are still in the system? What about my other relatives that are in the system? And just really having the heart to say we have to do something about it, and not feeling alone in that, and being a part of other people fired up and ready to say, you know, what else are you going to take from me? I've lost a lot. I've been taken from, but what I haven't lost is my life, my heart, my determination to find a way to overcome. And I think all of us, you know, are here with that same drive and motivation to move forward together. And kind of strategically thinking about next steps, you know, how do we take something that's so important, hearing what Rochelle said about kind of the current state of you know, what are current outcomes looking like? You know, that it's great that we have this, but more, absolutely more needs to be done, because outcomes, child welfare should take on, to me, I feel like this huge mission of we are determined to develop leaders, lawyers, doctors, educators, business people, authors, professors, that should be the mission and vision, that if a child is going to be removed, or that separation occurs, and the trauma that comes from that separation and that loss, covering all of these angles, that the determination should be, maybe we can't, you know, these things happened, but now that you're here, all of us in our respective roles, we're determined to produce leaders. But that is our motivation, that is our determination, because if people, every child that comes in, whoever has that interaction can see that young person that is full of power, and to not look at us as if we're pitiful. We're not. We're courageous. We're determined. We're intelligent. We're loving. We're kind. And our capacity to be great lives in us every single day. So imagine being celebrated. Welcome, young people. Welcome. To be intentional, I think there should also be, like, you know, anytime you start a new job, anytime you start a new educational journey, there's always kind of this orientation. You know, I would have appreciated, honestly, having an orientation about what it's like to be in the system and what I have to contend with. And even with that loss, that I have rights and people and responsibilities, and there's also people who have a responsibility to make sure that my outcomes can and will be different. But that's the mission and vision, to have, you know, to be oriented about what's happening, to have strategic, intentional trainings and discussions, ongoing, not just the meeting, but bringing us together. Because one of the things that absolutely made the difference in my life, self-emancipating, having been incarcerated as a youth and being a mother by the time I was 15, what gave me hope and validation and acknowledgement was being a youth advocate, being involved in that process, being a part of CYC, recognizing that I'm, not only was I determined to not fail and become another statistic, but that there was resources available to me to make sure, to try to ensure that that's not going to happen. And part of that was having a voice and recognizing our power and our ability and our capacity to make a huge difference. We are making a difference. We have the last almost 20 years of child welfare legislation has been led by current and former foster youth. We are treasures to be cherished and to be fed and to build our capacity. And there's strategic ways that we can do that. And that has to include, it must include current and former foster youth. We have to be there. Young people that are in the system need to hear our stories. Professionals, child welfare people need to say, hey, we need to bring our powerful allies and community members in these spaces because we need examples for these young people. We need Rita, who's a sociology professor now. Those of us we are overcoming. We are changing those statistics, and we need to have those stories told. Not just only 1 to 3% of us get a degree. More of us are doing other things. What other things are we doing that we're not talking about, that we're not celebrating? So having youth empowerment conferences, these are transformative events that are losing and have lost funding. CYC conferences, right? What happened to It's My Life conference? Some of y'all remember It's My Life, right? Those conferences were transformative, and we need to put our resources in those opportunities that bring us together, that we are validated, that we're acknowledged, that we're celebrated, and that we're trained strategically how to navigate. And those stories and those examples have to come from us. We are a big part of it. And those doors, y'all we're there, we're everywhere, right? We're all over this country. We represent a global community, transnational community. How are we going to utilize our resources together? And I know I'm running out of time. So, yeah, and that's, and I just want to say that, we make ourselves available because we care about this. We're here on a Thursday in the morning, almost 300 of us. The change has to be how we see young people, how we're sharing, how we're realizing and building this critical awareness about what their rights are and how does that look like scenarios and how to advocate for themselves. And we're a community, and I hope that we will continue to come together to celebrate, where we are today and the direction that we're going. And hopefully that all the people here can, the next time you see a young person, that you say, I see power in you. I see beauty in you. We're going to make sure that you realize your dreams and aspirations, because it's our responsibility, and we're going to make that happen, because there's resources available to make it happen. But healing is crucial to that. And that has to be a part of that, our cultural identity and who we are, where we come from, all of those great things. And, I have a lot to say, but being the last panelist, sometimes time runs out a little bit quickly. So thank you everyone for having us. And please keep in contact with us. I'm here in San Diego, California. I will, I'll make myself available. Hear us out, bring us around, and we'll show love and our wisdom and insight to our young people in our community. And love y'all. Ciao.
Thank you so much, Rita. Thank you for making yourself available too. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a very informative panel. I think that was a great way for us to really look into the past and learn how the Foster Youth Bill of Rights came to be and why it's so imperative that we have that today. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break for about 15 minutes. And when we reconvene, we're going to hear from our amazing youth panel and how they are changing the dial on the drastic outcomes on youth exiting the system. Ladies and gentlemen, we will reconvene at 10 o'clock. See you then. All had a restful break. Guys had a chance to get your coffee and your refreshments refilled. Like, we're going to get a chance to transform into an important event that I'm actually really excited to hear. We're going to get a chance to hear from youth panelists on what the Foster Youth Bill of Rights mean to them, as well as their perspectives on how to make systematic change. Zahira will be the facilitator of this panel, and she is a recent UC Davis graduate and a current non-minor dependent that works as California Foster Youth Initiative AmeriCorps service member. In her position as a foster youth mentor, Zahira works with the Yolo County Office of Education and Woodland Community College to provide services to 12 and 21-year-olds dependent in Yolo County and helps run the independent living program. She is originally from a small town in the Santa Cruz Mountains and is hoping to dedicate the rest of her life to helping other foster community. Zahira?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I see some of our panelists are coming up, so I will kind of go ahead, and us panelists should be pretty ready, but we would just love for you guys your name, pronouns, organization, so YEP, CYC, kind of time frame when you were in care, so maybe, you know, as a young child, as a teenager, and then maybe a fun fact about yourself. So Natasha, I think coming on, if you are able to present and introduce yourself, that would be awesome.
Yeah, sounds great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Natasha Sosa. I use she, her gender pronouns. I'm currently a member of California Youth Connection, and I first entered care in 2004 and then re-entered at 2012, where I ended up aging out. I'm currently a non-minor dependent in AB 12. And an interesting fact about me that most people don't know is that I was born in Elkhart, Indiana. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that. Let's go on to Chris, if you would like to introduce yourself as well.
Hello. As you guys said, Christina, I go by Chris, she, her, and hers. And I've actually spent time in care from when I was younger. Middle school age, and also my teenage years until I aged out at the age of 21. Fun fact about me is I like to write poetry.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. We'll go on to Christina next.
Hi, my name's Christina Tanner. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm from CYC, and I spent 11 years in care, all the way from 7 to I'm currently still in the system. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. Let's go on to Mia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mia Villa. I just want to thank everybody for being here today. This is a very important subject for all of us. And my pronouns are she, hers, and I was in foster care at the age of 15. That's when I entered foster care, and I did extended foster care all the way until 23. So I exit about 2 years ago. That's when I exit foster care. And an interesting fact about me would be I was not born in the US. I was born in Mexico, but was brought to the US at a very young age.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will go on to Jasmine.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Harris. I use the she series or they series pronouns. I've been a member of CYC for 6 years now, a former Yolo County YEP ambassador. I entered foster care my freshman year of high school, and I'm currently a non-minor dependent. And one fun fact about me is that I really like to travel, whether it's a camping trip or a new country. I try to get out a lot.
Looks like Amy
And
frozen.
yeah, so it looks like we're having technical difficulties. So I'm going to pass the mic to Alicia.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alicia Lozoya. My pronouns are she/her. I'm a former YEP ambassador for Sacramento County. I was in care from 14 years old to 23 because I was also in extended foster care. And a fun fact about me is I have a twin brother.
Okay, so I apologize, my internet kind of went out, but I'm assuming Jasmine went and did perfectly. And Alicia, I'm assuming that you went and also have done your introduction as well. Okay, awesome. So it's looking like we've all kind of done that. So we'll go ahead and ask Chris and Mia the first question kind of on our panel, and that is, do you think that the Foster Youth Bill of Rights is necessary? And if so, why? So Chris, if you want to start us off.
Sorry about that. Yes. So the question is, do you think that Foster Youth Bill of Rights is necessary? I believe that it is, only because it'll allow the youth to have an understanding of what their rights is. It's important for youth to know their rights while they're in care. So if something were to happen, they know who to talk to or where to go in order for them to talk to the person.
Awesome. Thank you. And Mia, would you like to add on to that?
Yes. Do I think the Foster Youth Bill of Rights is necessary? Yes, I do. I do think that it's necessary for us to have the right to be treated with respect. We have the right to be in a safe environment, in a safe home, to feel safe. We have the right to receive any medical, any dental, any mental health services, or any other services that we need. We already come from a really traumatic situation, getting removed from our placement or just living other experiences. So for us to be treated with some sort of respect, to have some right, that's why I do think it's necessary for us. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both for answering that first question. So we'll move on to our second question and have a few more of our panelists answer this. So did you ever think, or did you ever learn about your rights while you were in foster care? And if so, when and how did you learn them? And Christina, if you would like to start us off, and we'll go to Jasmine and keep going.
Yeah, hi. So I learned about my rights when, just like Rochelle said, CYC was working on AB 175. That's when I started learning about the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. I never really heard of them before that. And working with CYC really taught me all of my rights and, like, you know, helped me get a deeper understanding of what those are and who to call and contact when I did have a violation in my rights. Yeah. And I'm passing on to Jasmine.
Thanks, Christina. Since I entered care at an older age, I definitely remember going over my rights during different times, whether it was a placement change or just like an annual review. But one of the struggles was I didn't really have the knowledge or the power to, I guess, utilize my rights or hold people accountable for them. Like, for example, the right to attend your school of origin. If I wanted to attend my school of origin, which was in another city, it's like, there's questions like, you know, how am I getting to school? Who's funding it? You know, am I catching the bus? Is somebody giving me a ride? And also just having somebody to advocate for me when it comes to, you know, understanding the importance of my rights, or the importance of, like, why attending a school of origin would be important to somebody. And so, even though I knew about my rights and I heard about my rights, I didn't really know how to, get my rights or my needs met.
Awesome. Thank you both. Let's go ahead and have Chris and Mia also answer this question, and then have Alicia kind of end it for us.
So I actually didn't know about my rights. I mean, when I was in care, when I first had entered the care again when I was 15, they had me sign a paper. They said these are your rights, but they didn't really explain it to me. I mean, when I lived in the group home, they had up on the wall, they had it, but it wasn't really to where we can read it. I didn't really know about the rights until I started coming into CYC, and this was back in 2014. So that's when I started realizing that we actually had rights.
Thank you. Mia, if you would like to go.
Did I learn about my foster rights when I was in foster care? I did not. I entered foster care, like I said, at the age of 15. So when I got detained, I went to the child welfare office, and I was sitting there. I do remember my social worker just handing a paper to me saying, like, you need to read over this. These are some of your rights. But as a teen, as getting removed from your home, leaving your siblings and everything as a traumatic experience, the last thing you want to do is just someone hand you a paper telling you to read something. And my rights were never explained to me during my time in foster care. I was very lucky to be in a good placement that I didn't have to use my rights because I received all my needs were met. But I would have loved to know about my rights and that I had a right as a foster youth, and also just so I could know that we have those rights. I did learn about the foster care Bill of Rights when I joined California Youth Connection. Also, during my professional time, the Ombudsman's office, great at explaining all of the foster care Bill of Rights in some of my work trainings. So when I exit foster care, that's when I started learning more about the rights. And that's why I am a huge advocate for these rights to be met and that we do have a voice. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And I think if we would like to have Alicia kind of end us off on the second question.
I had been in a couple group homes until I finally, probably like my third or fourth one, really started to understand, like, foster youth rights and stuff like that. And it's pretty funny. I actually learned from like other youth. I didn't learn from like an adult or anything. It was like other kids in the group home, pretty much like telling me like, hey, this is what this paper is for. You can call this licensing number. Just because like certain rights were being violated.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for answering that. We will skip ahead and go to question number 3 and have Natasha answer this one. So, have you ever experienced your rights not being upheld? And if so, how did it make you feel and how did you try to resolve it?
So in one of the homes my sisters and I were placed in, our legal guardians would take away our family visits and phone calls away whenever we got in trouble. So this was their preferred form of punishment in the house. And this really frustrated me and my younger siblings because we never felt like we could act as kids because like rather than getting grounded or maybe not even being able to watch the TV, we were stripped from our lifelong connections, and that really had an impact on us. What frustrated me the most, though, was that when we voiced these concerns of multiple, like, different issues of abuse to our social workers, our social worker told us that there was nothing she could do, and she stated because we had entered into like a relationship of legal guardian versus like just regular foster parents, that they had complete control over us and we had no rights. And I was really, really angry because at the time I felt like the system was supposed to be protecting me and they did nothing to ensure my safety and well-being.
Well, thank you for answering that question. And I think as we continue with these kind of remaining questions, we'll see that it hasn't always been, I guess, the smoothest ride in terms of our with the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. So thank you, Natasha. We'll have Jasmine answer this fourth question. So what advice would you give social workers, probation officers, and other caregiver/facility staff about upholding foster youth rights?
Thank you. And thank you for sharing, Natasha. One piece of advice that I would give, different stakeholders in the system is really do your part, right? Make sure that you know the Foster Youth Bill of Rights, you understand the language behind it, you understand the resources that are available to, uphold those rights. Making sure that you're supporting youth with their advocacy, making sure that you're educating youth on their rights, I think are some of the biggest ways that you can support youth and their rights. I think a huge issue in the system is a lack of education. A lot of times, there's always the argument, oh, the dollars aren't there, or I don't know how we would do that, when there's actually language in place. There's a lot of times federal funding for some of these things, and it's about knowing the information. And so I really would just encourage you guys to really look over the Bill of Rights and really network and connect, and also take notes, because I think one of the other issues is that a lot of times people gain the knowledge, but then it doesn't get passed on. And so again, that's like a gap in services and a gap in education. And really as a community, we can really make sure that we are giving youth, we're really supporting youth in a holistic way.
Awesome, perfectly said. Thank you, Jasmine. Going on to number 5. So what can be done to better ensure that youth kind of know their rights? So this tags on with the previous questions. And Christina and Natasha, if you guys would like to answer this one, that would be awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine. That's a perfect segue into this next question. So just like you said, just, knowing those rights as, care providers and, people who, give service to these youth. For example, so, I just happened to just get a new social worker for our county, and we were going over my rights and having me sign the paper that I have to sign for it. And I asked her, I said, hey, did you know that there is new rights to this not updated Bill of Rights? And she's like, no, I had no idea. And those bills, that bill came out a year ago. And so those all county letters have been out, those educational pieces. And so I think that one thing that really there's a lack of is communication. And not just for the social workers, but for any service providers, from their, higher ups, their directors, from their program managers, from their, from those types of people. So just having better communication all around, and people being educated on, helping youth understand these rights, which is the most important thing that you can possibly do as a social worker, is just be educated on the things that you're trying to teach your youth.
Awesome, thank you. And Natasha, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so the earliest memories I have are when I re-entered care in about 2011. And I remember having to sign a bunch of random papers social workers gave me, but being a 4th grader at the time, I didn't really comprehend everything that was going on. I just knew that I was in a new place and these people were going to be taking care of me, but I didn't know why, or why I couldn't see my parents anymore. I became a member of California Youth Connection when I was 16. That is when I learned that not only do I have rights, but also the power to for myself. Went along with what social workers or foster parents told me, but CYC gave me the tools to voice my own opinions. I think the child welfare system needs to understand that they're dealing with youth of all different ages who all learn in a variety of ways. Personally, for me, it would have helped a lot when I was younger if my social worker had sat down with me and explained what every right meant in words more suitable for a 4th grader. And this also would have helped me later on in years when social workers told me that I didn't have any rights. Then I would have known from the beginning that this wasn't the case.
Thank you both for sharing. That is awesome. So as we're kind of coming up on our last 3 questions, we'll have Chris, Mia, and Elisa answer these if possible. So what can be done to better implement the Foster Youth Bill of Rights? So Chris, if you want to start us off. Okay, like she might need 1 minute. So Mia, if you would like to answer this question.
Yes. So what can be done to be better to implement the foster youth bill of rights? I think, like most of us mentioned, the better communication between social workers and the foster youth, and also include the foster parents. So none of these rights are being broken, and the foster youth has their needs met. I think that there should be more mandatory trainings for social workers on the foster care bill of rights, and the caregivers. That way they're both on the same page and they meet the needs of the foster youth. I know it's really hard that most of us have the image in back of us that paper was handed to us because we were too young or just going through a traumatic situation. So maybe changing that and going over your rights in a different way, like the social workers to do it in a different way for us, and overall just keeping the communication with us and our caregivers, whether we are in a group home or in a foster care house placement, just letting us know that we do have the rights, and also letting the people who are taking care of us that we have rights, that way they're not being broken, and we just feel that we have that support and we have that control. Thank you.
Hello, sorry about that. Sorry. I think what could be done to better implement the Foster Youth Bill of Rights is to do follow-ups regarding when the social worker, your IOP worker, or even if a caregiver gives you that paper to sign, maybe to do like a follow-up, just so that the youth know and that they understand, that they can get a better understanding that they have all these rights and that they have access to these rights. But also maybe to do trainings as well with the social workers so they can be able to let the youth know that, hey, you have these rights and there's these rights, but they don't do that follow-up that they need to do. So maybe if they were able to do a follow-up maybe about every 3 to 6 months, I think that would allow the youth to know that they have these rights and it'll implement them better.
Awesome. And I apologize. My internet has been obviously the worst today. So I think since Christina and Mia just went, Alicia, I don't know if you were able to go, but if you would like to also answer this question, if you haven't already.
When I was thinking of the question, I know the other two answered it more in like a way of like implementing it as if, you know, just teaching people about it, that kind of thing. But when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about it more in the way of like, how can we get workers like probation officers, social workers to actually follow the actual Bill of Rights? And accountability, it came to mind because my personal experience and my group homes, if you like were trying to stand up for yourself and your rights and you were calling licensing, you were pretty much like labeled a troublemaker. And I don't think that's okay. I think, you know, when I was reporting things to workers, you know, I was in out-of-state placement. So I was far away from home. They were pretty much, you know, able to do whatever they wanted. And my worker would fly out every couple months to come see me and check on me. And when I would pass on information, I feel like it wasn't taken seriously. So there should be, like when reports are made, I feel like there should be thorough investigations, just as if CPS was getting a report. I think that it needs to be taken more seriously. And I think that when it's not, there should be accountability and also, you know, penalties. Just because I feel like when you put a consequence on things, like say like a traffic ticket, you understand just how serious and important the issue is once you have to kind of like answer the consequences of it.
Awesome. Thank you all for answering that question. And I know even in the chat, we're having some ideas of how to implement this. So this is great to hear all voices. So we'll continue on and have Natasha answer this question. If you could add another right to the Foster Youth Bill of Rights, what would it be and why?
So Gibson's Assembly Bill 175 states that every youth in care over the age of 12 has the right to have reasonable access to computer technology and internet. However, reasonable access usually means that it is left at the discretion of foster parents. From my personal experience, internet access was treated as a reward and was granted only at certain hours. This made it especially hard in high school when I was cramming for a test or writing for a paper with limited internet access. I believe that it is the right of every foster youth to have equal access to technology. For quite some time, CYC has been fighting for this right, and in light of the pandemic, we have seen just how important technology is in our day-to-day lives. So I understand that this is already a law, but I would really love to see better implementation of it.
Awesome. And as we wrap up, we'll have Christina kind of say the final word, or, kind of getting there. But how can the child welfare and foster care system advance the Foster Youth Bill of Rights?
One way I really think that can happen is advertisement. I think that walking into a CDSS office or walking into different offices, they're posted right at the front door, but they're not posted throughout the offices. They're not posted in like their family meeting rooms. They're not posted in in visitation rooms. So having them more available and readily available for youth, I think that's one way to start that. Two, just like we've said throughout this panel, is communication and education on the topics through your service providers. So when we do have questions that come up and we do have questions of, hey, this is what's happening, where do I go about it? Then as a service providers, you can answer those questions and know that right off the top, where you don't have to go back and, ask somebody that question. You could just know that automatically. I think also just knowing the resources that are out there that show what those are. So knowing that you can go to the Ombuds site and know your rights. You can call the Ombuds and, report and to have an investigation done if your rights are being broken. So just knowing that there are resources out there and to show other resources. So if a pamphlet doesn't work for a youth to understand, there's videos readily available. There's other ways to learn the Bill of Rights than just a pamphlet or a piece of paper that we're handed. And just knowing your resources.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina, for stating that. And thank you all for coming on and doing this panel. I know that it's difficult to just do a panel in general, let alone kind of reach back and have to think about those memories and, kind of give your expertise and lived experience to a pretty big audience that we have here. So thank you all. I know that people are singing your praises in the comments, and on that note, I will pass it on to Tahari, who is our overall host. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we want to open up the chat room for any questions that you guys might have for the youth panelists. So if anybody wants to drop a question to the inbox, we'd be more than happy. We have a couple more minutes to answer any questions or any comments that you guys might have. Questions, comments, concerns? If we don't have any questions, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to transition to another break. We're going to do a 10-minute break, and then when we reconvene, we're going to break out into some breakout sessions. So again, going once, going twice, ladies and gentlemen, we have a few questions coming into the chat box. So for any one of the youth who would like to answer this question, we have a question from Joey Nunez that says, what would you say to your younger self knowing what you know now?
I think for me, personally, I think now of like a lot of the things that I've learned through being with CYC and just a lot of things I've learned throughout the system, I would just know that like you don't have to do it alone. People are out there for you to support you, and that you're not alone in this venture of the system and being in the system. There's people out there who have lived experience also, and there's people who are genuinely out there to help you too. While there are a few in the who aren't. So just knowing that, you don't give up and just keep going is what I would tell myself.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say to fight harder. I feel like sometimes I would get discouraged, and there's often so many things going on that it was like, I felt like I had to let it go. But like, I remember, asking for help in school, and I have a right to tutoring and, school support for school, and, not really receiving that. And, now a bunch of years later, I'm still struggling in the same area. So, just the little instances like that where it's like, I wish that I had either, just fought harder. And I, would tell little Jasmine to like fight harder and, keep asking, because, I do have that right.
We have a question from Alicia Ward, and she's asking, do you feel safe to report a violation of the Bill of Rights? And what could have made you feel a little bit more safe to report that?
So when I was in my group home, I had lived in the group home for about 2 years before I had exited out going into extended foster care. And they did violate. So I have a daughter, and at the time she was about 7 months, 8 months. And the group home staff wouldn't let me, I don't understand why, but they did not let me see her when I was at like call home and do all this stuff with her, although she was my child. And so when I told my social worker, I was kind of scared that when I told my social worker that I was going to get like lashed back at because of it. I didn't feel safe because some of the staff was just like really rude and really mean sometimes. And so I think what would have made it easier is if there wasn't any pushback on it at all. I think if they would have just let it go with a grain of salt, I guess, it would have been a lot easier to go and make contact with the people who I needed to make contact with, instead of feeling like, oh, I can't do this because I'm afraid that they're going to lash back, or they're going to say something, or they're going to do something to the point to where I won't be able to make that complaint.
Good insight. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we're going to be asking questions to about 10:45. So if you have any questions, make sure you jump in that chat room. I think it's imperative for us to get the insight from the youth perspective. And so we have a good question from Lily Colby, and she's asking the youth if they mind sharing on what folks can do to improve youth engagement, from panels to becoming staff to furthering your careers and harnessing your expertise. So again, do you mind sharing what folks can do to improve youth engagement, from panels to becoming staff to furthering your careers and harnessing your expertise? Anybody want to give a go at that?
Sure. I think, one thing to improve youth engagement is to invite youth to the room, invite them to the table at every piece, every part of the conversation. I think, when we talk about youth engagement, making sure that it's really meaningful and authentic youth engagement, not tokenism, not just, surface level, but really allowing, really listening to the youth, because they are experts on the system. They are the ones with the firsthand experience on what it's like. When you talk about, bringing engagement from panels to staff, again, same thing, right? How do you get foster youth to be staff? Well, you hire them, right? You give them the opportunity to that, whether it's even starting as an internship. There's all kinds of different ways to engage youth. I know the AmeriCorps program is one way that a lot of organizations have been engaging foster youth recently. And then when we talk about furthering your careers and harnessing your expertise, I think that's when hiring them and giving them specific opportunities is the best way for them to put that on their resume so that they can carry it on into the future and really have that a CV that shows their experience. I think a lot of times, when you invite them to a meeting, you get to hear their voice and you get that youth engagement, but how do they explain that, as they are moving forward as experts in the system and as young professionals? So really giving them, I guess, titles, status, and opportunity is really a great way to support them and youth engagement within the system.
That's good insight. I like how you said hiring opportunities. That's something that I also would love to see a lot more of, is just hiring opportunities for some of the youth, right? Because they give so much insight on that. About 10 more minutes left, ladies and gentlemen, for a few more questions. So if you guys want to jump in there and get one through, I'll be more than happy to share that. Vanessa Hernandez has a good question. She's asking, what characteristics or values should our next ombudsman person have?
Can I just add a little bit more to the last question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, just to kind of like piggyback off of what Jasmine was saying, there's a couple of organizations that actually have youth advocate positions, and it's because they understand and value the importance of having that person with lived experience on their team. And they understand that it can really give them certain insights and perspectives that they might lack if they didn't have that team member. So that's something you could also consider is, maybe creating some kind of position like that. I'm seeing it more often though, which is really cool because I think it's definitely beneficial.
Yeah. We got a question from Unifer, and she's asking, you think reviewing the Bill of Rights in front of the care providers would be beneficial?
Can I just ask that we go back to Vanessa's question about the ombuds person before we hop on to another question?
Yes, my apologies. Yes, Vanessa's question was, what characteristics or values should the next ombudsman person have?
I think for me personally, I think that the ombudsman should really take into consideration what youth are talking about and make sure that youth are in the room at all stages of any decision that's being made in that office, and just making sure that youth voice is heard, and just being able to collaborate with organizations like YEP and CYC and different types of youth-led organizations, and really take into consideration what they're working on and what they want to see done within the counties and within the state.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I think one important trait that they should have is lived experience. For someone that's going to be speaking on, foster care, I think that person should have lived experience in foster care.
I agree.
One that I think is accessibility. One thing that I really appreciated about Rochelle Trottenberg was that I always saw them in the room, and that I guess was really impactful to know that this person is a real person. They care about my rights, they care about the community, there's somebody within the community, and I think that was really empowering when I did want to call the ombuds person, because it made it feel like it was a real person and somebody who actually cared. And so I would love to see somebody who is accessible and around.
Okay, we got time for maybe 2 more questions. Jordan Sosa is asking, what does or what should it look like to respect the right of normal childhood experiences, including participation in age and developmentally appropriate extracurricular activities?
I honestly feel like, because I used to be a youth advocate for wraparound services, so we would get CFT meetings with kids in foster care and their caregivers and stuff. And I think they should be treated as normal kids. I feel like it's really weird to make it feel like it's such an extra thing to give them a normal life. Just as if you would want your kids to participate in extracurricular activities like sports or music or anything that you can help grow their interests. It's just, I think it should be regular. It should be normalized. It shouldn't be a big deal. But maybe, if the caregivers don't have the funds for that, maybe helping to further assist them in resources so that the youth have that option available to them.
I would like to add to that question. I've been advocating for extracurriculars. I think the whole time I've been an advocate, my whole life. Extracurriculars were very important in my development and my success in life. Without extracurriculars, I wouldn't be where I'm at for sure. So for me, I think it's just, there's so many barriers that the system likes to put on youth to create barriers for youth to participate in extracurriculars. you know, when you're on probation, you have, you have curfews, you have things that you have to follow through that. And that's, that's a barrier to extracurriculars. You have foster parents who say they won't transport, they won't fund extracurriculars. Working with the Youth Law Center for the last couple of years on an extracurricular bill that we tried to pass. It didn't get passed, but trying to pass it is that, just to see how many youth are facing the exact same barriers, yet nothing's being done about those barriers. And they're easily fixable. They're not, youth in the system are not just, they shouldn't be treated any different than regular youth. For me, like, I played basketball all my life since I was young, and I faced every single barrier in the book. But for me, it was so important for me to play that, like, it was not an option for a no answer. So, like, I always went out and got it, but funding was always an issue. I wanted to play on AAU teams where that's $1,000 a year. That's $1,000 a season. So, the county's not going to pay that. So how do you get that? You have to go out there and research. You have to go out there and, get grants and scholarships and all those things. And then there's also free extracurriculars where you go and play school sports, or you go and, do an art class, or you do these things that, right? But there's so many barriers of, hey, I'm not transporting you because of this, this, and this. And it's used as a reward instead of, these youth need something positive to look forward to in life, not just as a reward, So just, there's so many barriers, but at the end of the day, these are fixable barriers. And I think that one has to do with implementation of the Bill of Rights and understanding that what's in the Bill of Rights says that we have the right to participate in extracurriculars and we have the right to do those things and without barriers. So how do we fix that in the systems, and how do we fix that in our counties? That's a conversation that needs to be had.
That's good. We got time to answer maybe 2 more questions. I had a good question just pop up in the chat from Sandra Stevens. And she's actually asking, what can we do to support youth that are moved around a lot and are not really interested in participating in extracurricular activities because they feel like they're just going to be moved again? I can relate to that. So how can we encourage them and try to get them to change their mind?
I'm sorry. Can I just share a little bit about the last question?
Yeah,
about
of course.
my experience?
Yes.
So I, as a teen, I'm a huge advocate even now for our foster youth to be able to participate in extracurricular activities, because I was in their shoes once. When I entered foster care, I did volleyball, I did soccer, I did track, I did Future Farmers of America for 4 years. I did everything I could do to get my mind off what was going on at home, what was going on outside of school, so to me, I believe now that if I didn't do any of those extracurricular activities, I wouldn't be where I am now. When you participate in all these sports and you have that passion, you also think about your grades, and then you just kind of, like, I try to keep myself as busy as I could to not think about the trauma that I went through. And I think that that's why I'm a huge advocate for sports and for extracurricular activities, because those are what saved me. And this is why I'm here today. And because I don't know where I could have been. You have all these labels that the school wants to label you, that people want to label you, like, and all you could do is prove everybody wrong and prove yourself wrong that that's not who you are.
Character identity, that's very important. Last question, ladies and gentlemen, because I really think it's an important question from Sandra. She's asking, what can we do to support the youth that get moved around a lot? You get placed in the home, and then 2 weeks later, boom, you're shipped out to another county that you've never really been in. And so, what can we do to motivate them to be more involved when in the back of their mind is like, hey, why should I do this if you're just going to move me again?
Do you mind if I answer the question?
I'm sorry?
Do you mind if I answer the question?
Yeah, of course.
So I moved around when I first entered the system back when I was 15. I was pregnant with my daughter, and being a teen parent and also being a teen in foster care, no one really wanted me because I had a child. So I moved around from home to home to home, but also at the same time too, I moved to different high schools. I was in like 4 different high schools throughout my high school career. And it was so difficult because I was in clubs, I was doing all these things, and no one wanted to help me stay in one place for even a whole school year. Like,
I had to move so many different times. And when I finally had my daughter, it was even more difficult to try and stay, because when you're a teen parent and you're also a teen, no one wants you. No one wants to be able to put up with that responsibility. But like, I knew that my daughter was my responsibility. I knew that from the beginning when they told me that. So I think if they were to better help me, like with like childcare, because I got childcare, but even though I had childcare, they still didn't want to help me. They still wouldn't allow me to go and do these extracurricular activities or do all these things because, oh, you need to take care of your child. Oh, you need to do better in school. Well, how am I supposed to do better in school when you're moving me around so much because of these foster parents aren't wanting me to live in their home? When I finally moved into the group home is when things started becoming more stable. Things started becoming to where I was able to start doing extracurriculars. They were helping me go and continue to take care of my daughter. They were teaching me, okay, time management. They were helping me learn, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how you got to do it. And then these are the people that you need to talk to in order to move forward. And the support that really helped me, to be honest, was having mentors there to help me realize it's okay to fall. You're okay to fall, but you have to get back up. And look who's behind you. Look who's watching you. And so that stuck in my mind, and that's still stuck in my mind until this day, is I think mentorship is a really huge deal, whether it's when you're young, even till now. If they have someone that's there to actually talk to and allow them to just talk and not judge them, then that'll help them a way more, because that's what helped me. That's what helped me graduate high school. That's what helped me go into college. That's what helped me take care of my kids, is having that mentorship to be able to continue to grow, basically.
Thank you for that insight.
I would like to add a little bit to that as well.
Okay.
I think you have to take into consideration just, every single youth is different that's gonna, that you're gonna encounter. And, youth that are moving around so much, there's actually scientific data that moving is one of the most major life stresses that a person can go through. So just knowing that that's very stressful for them, you don't know what else they're dealing with. A lot of them are in survival mode, They might not be worried about, going and playing sports or something, but, just doing your best you can offer it. Maybe they don't even know what they're interested in, trying to just, really just try, just put it out there for them, invite them to certain things, and, hopefully it gets better. But just being patient with them and just understanding, everyone is different, and it might take a little bit more time for one youth versus another.
Thank you for that. Encouragement. Before we break off and take another break, I want to read a comment that Sadie just dropped into our comment box. And she's talking about just motivation, as far as that we can definitely encourage them, but from a trauma-informed approach, we'll need to promote stability to get to normalcy. And I want to put emphasis on that last sentence, promote stability to get to normalcy. That's a great insight, Sadie. I really appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to reconvene in 10 minutes, take a 10-minute break here. We're going to have everybody break off and rejoin us at 11 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. See you back. Your notebooks and take some notes, ladies and gentlemen, so you guys are going forward with that. Coming to the screen, ladies and gentlemen, going to be the Chandler sisters, and they're going to reflect on the impact of their foster care experiences with a message to our current foster community. Now, Jessica was in the foster care system from ages 12 up until the age 18. But rather than allow that negative experience to govern the rest of her life, she was determined to become a social worker to ignite the change for others, which would also mean challenging her very own self. For the past 5 years, Jessica has been a children's social worker with the Department of Child and Family Services in Los Angeles. Jessica has been and continues to be an advocate on the national stage for children and families involved in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems. And her sister, who has recently been married, Charity Chandler Cole, is a mother, a wife, and a nonprofit executive and social justice advocate. Having harshly experienced both the juvenile justice and foster care systems, Charity works passionately to address the issues and challenges plaguing our communities, our women, and our foster community. As an advocate, Charity is a Los Angeles County Commissioner for Children and families. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show.
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Guys. Hey, sis. Hi, Charity. So we have some really interesting questions today, Jessica, that I'm really excited to talk about. You want to go ahead and get us started with some of those questions?
Yes. So Charity, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has the slogan, foster care as a support to families, not a substitute for parents. How does this relate to your experience? Or do you even agree with that?
Thank you for the last point. So, that's a very interesting question. And having experienced the foster care system and, still advocating and seeing, the children that are growing up in the system and the people that have exited, and also just, my background and experience in criminal justice reform, I would disagree with both of those, actually. I think, personally, that when we look at the foster care system, we tend to look at it as an isolated issue, when in fact it's a negative side effect of a much larger issue. So when we look at our criminal justice system, which, negatively and disproportionately affects people of color and poor people, I don't think people factored in the fact that, children will be taken, from their families as a result of this. There will be a lot of trauma and abuse as a result of, those negative effects of our current criminal justice system. And so as a result, it was never built to actually foster children and care for children. It was something that was, in my opinion, quickly put together to try to solve a problem that should have never had existed. So yes, as we look at the foster care system today, we do see changes within the system as, we move towards figuring out, okay, how do you make sure we have positive outcomes? And so I don't think that, it's definitely not to replace families. It's definitely not to support families, because but it's really a mechanism put in place to kind of keep children in a safe place, while their parents are unavailable. So I would love for it to move to a place where, it is there to help families and to protect families. So really understanding and defining, what does it mean to help families, that are not together? What does that mean? How do we define that? And, how do we make that truly work? But I'm curious to know, what do you think? Because you're you work, in the field. So I'm curious to you, and having experienced foster care yourself, what's your perspective on that?
So I think as a slogan, it's good. I think that the goal and our vision is to support families. I think that we're supposed to help connect families to services and bridge a gap. And in addition to the, when we think about the kids we're finding homes for, due to maybe their parents becoming incarcerated, or maybe they're struggling with some type of addiction or some other situation, there's a lot of kids that are also in need of permanent homes because their parents become ill. We have parents who die, who pass away, and we still need to find relatives or appropriate plans for those children as well. So a lot of children, or with our older children, the lack of supervision, a lot of our laws have changed to where parents can't parent the same. They can't discipline the same. So the kids, as for no fault of the parent, are not manageable. And because the parents cannot keep them safe, keep them off the street, keep them from using drugs and doing things, we take them in with the idea that we're going to be able to hopefully rehabilitate those kids and send them back home. So I think that supporting those parents, giving them the training, giving them tools besides spanking or whatever the traditional ways we have discipline, is important, because like I said, the laws have changed, but there's a lot of circumstances. And I think that, this year we see that, with the pandemic, that there's going to be even more circumstances where the foster care system can, bridge the gap. And in regards to say that one of me and you got sick, I would hope that someone would be responsible while I'm in the hospital to find you and put my kids with you. So not so as a support. So I think that that's what we've been doing right now. That's been really positive. And I want to see more of that, us supporting families. We're here. I think there's a lot of relatives that we didn't explore before. There's a lot of fathers we didn't seek out before, that now we're exploring. And just my personal experience, in foster care, I feel like it was more so the substitute. I want to say that, if your parents weren't good enough or bad, so we're going to give you a better situation. But we both know that, as emancipated foster youth, we never entered a better situation. We just grew up. So I think there's been a shift. We have an amazing director now.
but maybe for the first time, we have someone who is very compassionate, very open. We have, you know, groups who are very interested in, like with today, 3FM, our faith-based initiative is about partnering with churches, making them stakeholders, making sure people understand that every church on the corner of this block, those are potential caregivers and foster parents. These are their children too, not just ours. And also looking at opening up like the LGBT community, making sure that they're having equal access to parents, making sure the kids that are growing up in foster care and have these circumstances and are identifying differently are getting services, you know, not disproportionately. So right behind African Americans, we see others, you know, people identify, especially part of the LGBT community, having disproportionate outcomes. And this is the first time that it's been at the table where they're stakeholders, they're partners at the table, and they're saying this is how we want to be treated. And even with us, I think with AB 12, when we were doing that advocacy, the goal was nothing about us without us anymore. Don't make decisions about what's best for us anymore without us. And we see that. You're on the commission now, so we know that your foot's on the back of some necks. A lot of necks. Change is here, right? So I think that the slogan is appropriate, and that is the shift. I think with the core practice model, the idea is the families are supposed to lead. They're supposed to be telling us what they need, and they fill themselves, not us telling them what they need and us filling them. And I think that that's what we're trying to do now with the core practice model. And I think that we've seen increased outcomes. We even have a whole, you know, just to move forward after this, we have a whole task force that's dedicated to eliminating racial disproportionality. I go every month and sit and learn about how my bias, even as a Black woman, is affecting people that look like me. Things I believe about myself that I'm passing down to my clients. You know, things that I've internalized negatively about who they are. You know, what my privileges are even in my skin, right? Because of my position of power. So I've seen a lot of change in the department. I think we're moving in the right direction. And before, I definitely want to light a match to the system. People know that. So
and you bring up really valid points because, you know, even having been in the system for both of us over 15 years ago, you definitely see a dramatic change because I didn't feel supported while in the system. I felt like, you know, I was just a kid that no one knew what to do or how to do. And, you know, my outcomes didn't matter at all. So you definitely see a shift in the system currently. And to your point, it has a lot to do with who are the stakeholders, who's sitting at these tables, who's leading these tables, and realizing that the real experts are the people that have, you know, experienced the foster care, and making sure that any advocacy that's done is with us, you know, leading with our allies, you know, standing beside us for sure. Right. We have a lot of former foster youth and current foster youth, you know, watching right now. And I think it's important that we leave them with a message, something for them, something to look forward to, because there's a lot of, you know, misconceptions about foster youth. There's a lot of, you know, people think that only, you know, that we, you know, are where we are because of certain circumstances and things. And I kind of want to dispel some of those myths and really tell, you know, youth what it means to be a successful foster youth, or even leaving them with a message, something that they can take from this.
I want to say that for me, I think that there's no, you know, exact recipe to how to create, you know, successful adults. I think for you, Charity, a lot of it was internal, like you were going to make it no matter what you needed to do, you were going to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you believe that you could create things for your future and for your life. I had to have it drilled into me. I didn't believe that I was worth anything. You know, I had internalized unworthiness and being unlovable, you know, not having mom and dad at the visits, a lot of Sundays only having you to pick me up for weekend passes, you know, not having anyone to show up or sign off for me to attend events or go on field trips in school. Like I internalized that I was not like other children, that I wasn't good enough. So even when the money came, we did IOP and they told us we could go to college and we had all this money and opportunity. It was like, but that's not for me. You know, like I'm stupid. I'm not good enough. You know, that's for Charity. Charity gets straight A's. You know, like she's smart. You know, people like her. You know, I was angry and you were kind of like kind to people, even when you were going through things, still helping people. So I think in addition to the fact that I had people come into my life and be kind to me and be patient with me, a lot of dollars were put behind me. So even so when I finally started trying to see if it was a possibility that I could go to college and create something, there was money backed at that time. It is financial, and some of it is, you know, emotional, having that support. Like my mentors that I had are still in my life now. They're still my family. I'm constantly building more people in my toolbox, in my toolkit. But I think that it's a lifelong journey that people expect us to get over after we get a degree or after we get a good job. And it's like, no, stuff still came up when mom passed. Stuff comes up every time I have a breakup. Stuff comes up every time I don't get the promotion I want. I go right back sometimes to being 16 again. So foster youth, they have to be very kind and patient with, forgiving themselves and allowing themselves to have their journey, their lifelong journey, but also make sure that they're forgiving others. My biggest thing, I think, today is that I forgave mom, and I forgave a lot of people from my heart because I had spent so much time thinking about her and thinking about other people that I wasn't invested in myself. I wasn't speaking life into myself. I was just dwelling on, when she didn't show up, and so-and-so didn't do this, and no one likes me. I had to forgive people for me without an apology, and then start encouraging myself and speaking life into myself, faking until I make it. Jessica, you smart, without the grade.
Just to add to that, for the foster kids that are listening and former foster, you guys are our sisters and brothers, and we will always be there for you. And I want you to know, if no one's ever told you before, that we are, the real superheroes of this world. And I think it's really important that you know that, because we come from different circumstances, we have different barriers and a different set of things we have to overcome, and our ability to be resilient through that is phenomenal. It's powerful. And when we succeed, despite all odds, we succeed in a totally different way. So I want to encourage just every, foster youth, former foster one here, that you are worthy for one. You will be successful and succeed in whatever, way you want to. There's no limit to what we can do. And when we put a limit on our success, when people tell us what we can and can't do, here's the thing. We literally can go about life. We can fail. We can become homeless, drug addicts, go to jail. And guess what? No one will question it. Okay? Because we're expected to fail. No one's going to look at Charity and say, well, we expected more of her. So now the opportunity for us to say, hey, I am powerful. I am resilient. I am strong, and I can be whatever I want to be. When people tell you you can't, you use that as motivation and ammunition to prove them wrong. Oftentimes we don't have to prove anything to anyone, but we do. We have to prove it to ourselves, and we have to prove it to the world, because if we don't, our other sister, foster sister, and brother will go about thinking that, okay, well, Charity didn't make it, if Jessica didn't make it, if this person didn't make it, then none of us can make it. And when we do make it, we have to be vulnerable and transparent and tell our stories, because that's how we're going to uplift each other. Sometimes we're all we got, but all you really need is yourself. And I went through a process where I literally looked myself in the mirror every day and told myself that I was worthy. Things I didn't believe at the moment, that I was beautiful, that I was smart, that I was strong. And one day I started to believe it all. And then once I started to believe all those things about myself, no one could tell me that I wasn't any of those things. So we go through a lot. We've experienced a lot of trauma. We've experienced a lot of hardship and pain, but I want you to use that as your weapon to go into the world and prove them wrong.
Yes, believe, 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 and believe. Powerful, strong words from powerful, strong women. Coming to the screen, ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer Troya, Sacramento, Chief Deputy Director of Adult, Children, and Families Programs at the California Department of Social Services. Troya was a principal consultant for the Assembly Human Services and Foster Care Select Communities from 2008 to 2009. She's also a Director of Advocacy for the California Court-Appointed Special Advocates Association from 2006 to 2008, and an attorney at the Youth Law Center from 2004 to 2006. We also want to congratulate Mrs. Troya because she just received a Juris Doctor degree from UC Berkeley School of Law. Jennifer.
Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for being here with us today. I'm not sure, can you see me? I'm not seeing myself on your screen, but are you? Okay, there we go. Now you can see me. Hi. Thank you all so much for being here, and what an empowering and fantastic day. I'm so grateful for the energy and enthusiasm and upliftment that I felt in all of the day, and in particular in that last video as we were coming to a close here. So today you had the opportunity to hear from a number of individuals who pioneered the way for the Foster Youth Bill of Rights to exist. You heard from former foster youth about their experiences in care. And in the breakout sessions, we got to work together to identify ways to understand how the Bill of Rights intersect with reality for our youth in care. and for the long-term trajectories of their lives. We also talked about ways technologies improved our opportunities to communicate with foster youth. And we had an overall overview of the Office of the Foster Care Ombudsman, which is such a critical resource in our state. We also had the opportunity to recognize the advocates who have supported foster youth and their rights throughout the years, and to celebrate together this incredible milestone marker. So thank you for attending. I also want to thank our CDSS colleagues and child serving agencies who were present. Your presence here with us is a key sign of the strength that we have together and our commitment to serving California's children and families and continuously improving and making lives and opportunities better through our work. Most importantly, I want to acknowledge the current and former foster youth in attendance today who shared their experiences and stories in vulnerable ways to help us all do even better through our work. I want to thank the guest speakers and panelists who took time to be here as well. The information and experiences you shared really teach us the importance of advocacy and listening to youth voice. Thank you to the Office of the Foster Care Ombudsman for putting this event together to celebrate this 20th year anniversary, and to the Child and Family Policy Institute for hosting the event with us. In closing, I hope that you all enjoyed today's event and were as inspired as I was, and that you took in information to help us as we continue the really hard and important work to improve the lives and opportunities for our children and youth in foster care and the trajectories for the rest of their lives. Thank you to each and every one of you.
Mm-hmm.